Hello, fellow songwriters, and welcome to episode 21 of the How Songs Are Made podcast. The podcast can now drink. Where we talk to notable artists about their songwriting process. I'm your host, Trey Xavier, and today I'm going to be talking to REVOCATION's Davidson about how he writes songs. Today's episode is sponsored by the amazing DistroKid. Whoop, whoop, whoop. You can't really see it because it's behind the microphone. And their awesome Hyperfollow feature. So what is Hyperfollow? It's a completely free and awesomely powerful promotional tool for anyone using DistroKid. It is the one-stop shop for all the links to streaming services and stores for your DistroKid release. So this is the link that you give people when they ask to hear your band, right? And the second that you finish uploading your song, you can start marketing your release. Oh, Trey, are you just talking about this and you don't use it? No. I put one up yesterday and it's in the description. There's a video coming out tomorrow that has an original song that I wrote, and you can pre-save it right now at the link in the description. Amazing, right? I put my money where my mouth is. I use DistroKid for all my releases. So as soon as it goes live, your Hyperfollow page automatically updates to include all the links. Right now, mine is just a pre-save for Spotify, but as it gets uploaded to all the other stores, it'll be updated as it goes. So it's a super simple tool that every artist should use for their new releases. Check the link in the description for 7% off your first year of DistroKid. And now, you know him from his bands REVOCATION and Gargoyle. The new REVOCATION album, Nether Heaven, drops September 9th. Please welcome my esteemed guest, Davidson.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Hi. What's cracking, dude? Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Glad to be on.
So we're here to talk about the new album from REVOCATION, Nether Heaven, which is coming out on September 9th, as I mentioned. And we're here to talk about how you write songs. You've written a lot of them. What number album is this for REVOCATION?
I think it's our 8th full length. Yeah. So I've probably written, and I was thinking about that the other day. I think I've written maybe 90 REVOCATION songs or something like that.
That's crazy.
We had an EP, and some of the records had more than 10 songs on them. So yeah, it's close to 90, I would say.
Hot damn. And then one full length and one EP with Gargoyle, is that right? Something to that effect?
Well, we did a demo, and those demo songs wound up on the full length. So I would say in terms of original music, we have a full length's worth of original music.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we're both from the Boston area. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Boston. Yeah,
in Boston proper.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, went to Boston public schools. Did the whole thing.
That's cool. I somehow managed to never see you during that whole time. We're maybe around about the same age, because I started going to Berkeley I was only there for a year, but in 2004, 2003.
Right.
So that would have been maybe just before you?
Yeah, right around probably the same time. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe,
just
maybe you were actively avoiding me. I don't know.
Fucking ships in the night.
Street, you see me on Mass Ave, and you just kind of go the other way.
Oh God.
Yeah. I know it is funny that we never really crossed paths, but I guess Berkeley's a big enough school, and I guess it all depends on the labs that you take. And who'd you study with there? I'm interviewing you now, right?
Yeah.
Off the bat.
Oh shit. I am going to absolutely blank on her name. Jazz guitar teacher. She was amazing, and I have completely forgotten her name.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it Bailey? Cheryl Bailey?
Yeah.
Oh, she was great. And then I got some other douchebag who I shall not name, who kind of ruined it for me. Anyway,
damn.
Just yeah, it kind of sucked. But if I'd have stuck around, I'd probably be on the other side of these kinds of interviews instead of doing this kind of, you know what I mean? You graduated.
Was it a jazz guy or?
Yeah, I was a jazz guy.
Oh, you got brutalized by jazz, dude.
His name is literally a British euphemism for a penis. So if you'll Anybody who went to Berkeley might know who this guy is.
Okay.
But all that to say that you went to Berkeley and you graduated.
Yep.
So fucking metal boy makes good. Did you study jazz? Because I know you're into jazz. Did you study jazz while you were there primarily, or mostly rock stuff?
I mean, in terms of my private lessons, it was primarily jazz, and I took like a good amount of jazz guitar labs and stuff. My official major was like professional music, which is like the choose your own adventure kind of smorgasbord of delights. So I had some education courses. I took some like a lot of performance-based courses, some music business-based courses. So kind of like a whole bunch of different shit.
Cool. Yeah, just giving the people a little bit of background on yourself and your musical path of education and stuff. I feel like most of the people that I've had on here, metal dudes, didn't really study a whole lot all that formally. So part of the reason that I'm excited to pick your brain is because I took a more academic path and also like metal. How did you get to a point where you decided that you wanted to study music formally like that?
Well, I'd always grown up like learning music. I mean, like when my mom bought me my first guitar, I had like a Yamaha Pacifica and like a little crate amp or whatever, and she was like, if I'm gonna buy you this guitar, like you have to like agree to take lessons. And I was like totally cool with that. I just wanted to play guitar. I was like really just wanted a guitar. So she's like, all right, I'll get you the guitar, but like you need to do lessons. Like you're not just gonna like fuck around. So right out the gate, you know, I was studying with this dude Jay. You know, great guitar teacher for me. Where I like me being a beginner, he was super cool. He was open. Like he would just basically teach me songs that like I wanted to know. And I feel like after like maybe a year with him, I was just kind of practicing so much and kind of took to it like pretty well that I felt like I had the enough of my like enough tools to kind of like work on stuff like on my own. But he got me started, and then I was going to, I mean, as knowing Boston maybe, I went to Boston Latin School, so which is like an exam school. You had to go in. Like my parents were like super stoked for me to like get into this. Like I think it's like the oldest school in the country. It's like kind of like a prestigious, you know, it's like a feeder school for like Harvard and like, you know, MIT or, you know, lots of kind of bigger institutions, but I just did horribly there. Like I just was like, just wanted to play guitar all the time. Like I didn't give a shit. Like you had to like learn like actual like Latin, and like I just was not in that headspace. Like I just wanted to play like rock and roll, and I was getting more into like heavy metal. So I think I got like, I basically failed out of like 8th grade, and I was faced with like either having to like repeat the year, or there was like this like up and coming arts high school, like you know, down the street basically, called Boston Arts Academy. And you know, I auditioned for them, and they were like, your grades like aren't good, but like we'll take you into the 9th grade, because like they just like needed guitar players and stuff. I'm like, all right, sick. So for me it was like a no-brainer. Like I clearly wasn't thriving at the school I was in. No offense to Boston Latin School. I mean, it needed like fucking geniuses like are produced from that school. Just like I was not interested in really learning at that point. So but once I got to Boston Arts Academy, I really kind of was able to thrive. I mean, like I got to play guitar for like an hour or more like out of my day, and I think like having my passion just so readily available there, like kind of, you know, inspired me. Like I wanted to go to school, and I had some great teachers there. So that was my first introduction to jazz. I played in the big band. I played in several guitar ensembles there. I was under the tutelage of one of my best friends now. I mean, I've developed like a great relationship with him over the years, but back then he was just sort of a fresh-faced college student. His name was Colin Sapp. I've given him shout-outs before, but shout out to Colin, one of my best friends. And yeah, just like an incredible musician, super passionate. It was cool because like he was really into, like he was just, first of all, he was a great teacher. Like I didn't know anything about jazz at all, and it was like cool. Like here's the guitar solo for like, and I know how to read music, like nothing, but it was like, here's the guitar solo for Wes Montgomery 4-on-6, or like here's the Pat Martino solo for Just Friends, and it's like, all right, you're gonna play it like with 3 other guitar players like in unison, and like, oh, by the way, like we have like a jazz like competition like coming up at like the Heinz Convention Center in like 6 months, so like you gotta get like your shit together. So it was very much like just sink or swim. But he was so good at teaching and allowed me to get like a real appreciation for the jazz genre. A lot of great teachers there. I mean, like I said, I played in the big band, so that was cool. Like feeling like the power of like a horn section. Like I don't know, like it definitely like inspired me. And with everything, I kind of was able to look at it like, because at the time, like I was like into jazz, but I mean I was like really into metal. I was just so fucking into all different types of metal. I was like discovering all these bands for the first time. I was so rabid and just wanted to like consume every little piece of metal history, or just going down these little rabbit holes of like, oh, like I'd read like a thank you section of some random like thrash band and then learn about like 10 other thrash bands from that and get their CDs and all that stuff. So it was actually much harder back in the day. I probably sound like an old man now, but like it wasn't like you had like Napster was like just becoming a thing, but there was no Spotify. There was none of that shit. It was like if you wanted the record, like you had to go on eBay and like buy it, and you had to wait for it to come in the mail. And I mean, I remember getting like X orders. Though I'm kind of jumping around here a bit, so I apologize if this is hard to follow. But
okay.
I remember like I got X orders, The Law, in the mail, and I waited like so long for that CD to come. And when you finally get it, like you don't just like listen and skip a track. I mean, I like spent
lit a candle,
hours.
Paid very close attention.
Yes, exactly. So I think it maybe fostered more of an appreciation for music. But yeah, I learned not just, well, I mean, I think you have to learn theory if you want to learn jazz. There's just so much going on. There's a whole vocabulary, and you need to learn the vernacular and like the language and all that kind of stuff. So like I got like a really great crash course in music theory, really in depth. In my studies at Boston Arts Academy. And from there, Boston Arts Academy was like a pilot school. So in a similar way that like, a lot of people go on to different kind of institutions from Latin school that might be like, the Harvards or the whatevers, right? Like with Boston Arts Academy, it was much more like, it would be a feeder school for like Berkeley, or there was a visual arts program, or like, so it would be like mass art, and they had a dance program, and they had a theater program. So like any kind of like arts college, like that was kind of what Boston Arts Academy was like set up to do, was to like kind of prep, kids for those institutions. So I was able to start taking Berkeley like summer program lessons, like I think by the time I was like a sophomore or something like that. So like I would like, they had like a Berkeley 5-week program, which was you'd learn theory, you'd study privately. That was where I first started studying with Joe Stump, who was just incredible.
Yngwie Jr.
Studied with him at Berkeley a little bit. Just super shredder dude. Great dude too. It's funny now, like I've taught at Berkeley a couple times, and I'll see like Joe like in like the hallway or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, Double D, what's up? Like he's a great dude and an incredible.
He's fucking crazy good.
It's insane. It's like, it looks like his hand like isn't fucking moving when he's playing. There's such like a economy of motion. It's so dialed in. Anyway, but yeah, so I started taking college courses, or not, sorry, summer program courses there, and then eventually I actually ended up taking college courses while I was still in high school, because I knew I wanted to go to Berkeley. They had this like special kind of program kind of worked out where I think I took like some kind of like guitar lab there, like in my senior year at Berkeley, as kind of like a further way to like kind of get your foot in the door, because that was like my number one. Like I don't even think I had a backup plan. I was just like, I'm gonna go to Berkeley, and yeah, and then starting my journey at Berkeley, it was just a super exciting time. My band we weren't signed yet, but things were moving in the right direction. So I had I feel like a really good creative outlet, but also I was just so entrenched in my studies and learning, studying with all these great guitar players there. Studied with Brett Wilmot, studied with Bruce Saunders, John Boboyan, like like lots of like kind of bebop, modern jazz guys, um, and I learned a shit ton there.
Awesome. That's really interesting to hear, especially like where that was in time wise in the timeline of the band. As you're going, you're studying more and more jazz, and like you can. I mean, I haven't like really tracked it in terms of the influence on the Revocation stuff, but you've always been very far from straightforward whatever death metal, thrash, anything like that. But I think more than anything else in the phrasing of your solos, I hear a lot of that kind of influence. Like we were talking about before the stream started, I did a little video talking about your chromatic stuff in your solos that to me like makes it much more tasty phrasing, memorable, like smooth, tasty phrasing within metal is kind of a rarity, I think, in a lot of ways. But there, in terms of how we usually go about it here on the podcast, now that we've got a bit of an idea of how you came up and where you got a lot of the stuff that you got, there's really only one question on this podcast, and then all the other ones are follow-ups. And that question is, what is your typical songwriting process, and was it any different for this new album?
So I guess I've obviously learned things over the years and refined my songwriting craft. So to answer your second question, like it's kind of a yes and kind of a no, right? Like I think you get better at interfacing with technology, probably maybe helps your workflow a bit. Like just a quick little, if we were to go back in time, just one more, for a brief moment here. Like I used to record to like cassette tapes. You know what I mean? Like it would just like I'd find like random like blank tapes like in the house, and like I didn't even realize like I had this like or my parents had this cassette player, but it had like a record function, so I would just like plug directly into that like through like a Metal Zone pedal and just like record like ideas. Like I'd write a riff like with my crate amp. I had like a Mockingbird and would just kind of like shred in the basement, and then like something would pop out and I'd be like, oh, this is cool, and I would just like plug directly into this like tape machine and record like straight to that. So like very like archaic. And then I like graduated onto like, oh, GarageBand, this is crazy. I mean, it was quite a step up. And I use Logic now. So I think in terms of like like the technology I'm using and interfacing with that, like that's obviously like changed throughout the years, but the core thing, I think that's been the common thread ever since I like kind of first started writing music, was it all starts with the riff. Where that riff comes from, I think probably don't even know. Like I might just be like messing around and something pops out to me. Sometimes it could be I'm working on a specific thing or thinking about a specific thing and something gets developed that way. Other times, like I said, it's just like kind of totally unconscious. I'm just kind of riffing around and like something pops out. I'm like, oh, that's cool, and I'll kind of explore it more. But yeah, it all begins with the riff, and then I kind of build everything else around that. So I mean, I can walk you through my process if you want from there. Yeah,
I'm most like that's a pretty common answer. It's usually the big differences usually come from what you do after you have the riff. So
right.
Let's take us from there.
Sure. So in my cassette days, it would just be fucking random riffs, and like it would be like a pain in the ass. Like you'd be like, oh, was that on side A or side B? And I'd have like multiple tapes. Then like going into like the digital realm, I wasn't like much better at cataloging my ideas. So like I kind of would save all the riffs as like different files. So it'd be like a heavy riff or like thrashy riff. And then like 6 months later, you're like, what the fuck does heavy riff even mean? So you have to like go back and like listen to it anyway. So like what I realized is it makes more sense to catalog things by tempo. And you could catalog things by tempo even for different projects too. Like, So, I might have like a revocation subfolder and like a gargoyle subfolder, and then catalog things by tempo, within that as well. Because obviously, if I'm running for revocation, it's going to be different than if I'm running for gargoyle or for any other future project or whatever. So, whatever your main band is, in this case, we'll talk about revocation. I'll have all these like subfolders of tempos, and it will just literally be named like riffs, whatever, 120, 130, 140, 200. 220. And now, obviously, you have to think about the general vibe of the riff, like the aesthetic of what you're going for. So it's not like every riff in my riffs 200 folder, it's not like they're all going to go together. But if I have 10 riffs in there, the chances that like at least like 2 or 3 of them might go together might be pretty like high, especially like, when I think about certain tempos, I think about like, kind of thrashy elements or death metal elements or other slower tempos. Maybe it's like a sludgy kind of thing. So like kind of piggybacking off of other ideas. Now, sometimes those riffs happen in the same session. So you'll just be kind of like on one when you'll write a riff, and then like I'll call them like cousin riffs, right? Like they're like, it's not the same thing, but it's like related. I mean, probably composers will call it like motivic development or something like that. But like for me, it's like, it's related. They're not like direct, but there's something, there's a bridge there that can connect the two. Like, all right, this might be a verse riff, and this could be like, maybe it's not the chorus, but like this could be like a cool like solo section riff that kind of fits with the general vibe of that song. I think that's the coolest thing about songwriting is because like you said, everyone kind of maybe, or a lot of answers might be the same thing where it starts with the riff, but yeah, like what a verse to me is versus you, or what a chorus to me is versus you, might be like totally different. So you might have 10 riffs, or let's say it's a song, it might have 6 riffs, right? But how you might organize those riffs and how I might organize those riffs could be like completely different. I actually really learned that working with Marty Friedman when I did a collaboration with him, because we were just kind of going back and forth, and I had all these ideas, and sort of in my mind I had an idea of how it was like laid out, but it was obviously Marty's solo project. I was just kind of hired to come on and like co-write with him, so he had the final say in terms of the structure and all that kind of stuff, and the way he, like, his mind worked and laid it out was like totally different than how I might have laid certain sections out, and he kind of added things, and so it was cool kind of seeing his musical mind work, and it's like, oh yeah, this feels more like a Marty Friedman song, even though maybe I wrote like the majority of the riffs on it, because he added his solos and his signature kind of touch in terms of organizing the ideas. So just from an organizational standpoint, that can maybe sometimes be just as much someone's style as the riffs themselves, which is kind of interesting to think about. But yeah, I'll kind of go in and I'll listen through, and I'll think like, okay, cool, like this is at these 3 riffs out of these 10 all kind of fit together in some way, and that's where like some of the fun shit happens, because maybe the other 7 riffs, maybe magically those all fit together, and then boom, I've got like 2 songs, right? Like one is these 3 riffs here that I need to add more to, and then this other one is like almost like basically done. Maybe I wrote a bunch of those riffs all in the same session, and I was just like on one at that point, and it just naturally kind of flowed together, or just by luck of the draw, they just happen to fit together. Or maybe it's 3 songs, right? Maybe it's 3, 3, and 4, and I got to add just a little bit more to that one, and then I got 2 songs that are basically like half completed. But I guess the idea is like, once you start to kind of coalesce your ideas and like kind of coagulate, like that just kind of inspires me to like want to finish things up, or it's like this weird like Rubik's cube that I need to solve, right? Like once like I'm like tracking the scent of something, like I want to like, I can get kind of like obsessive about it, like until that song is like, that I need the puzzle to be like complete, which sometimes always doesn't work. You can't rush that either. Like I've had riffs that have just been sitting for, at this point I've used all my back catalog material, but like there was riffs that I had for like years that I wrote, like some of the very fucking first shit I've ever written that I still thought was cool. Then you randomly revisit it. That was actually the intro riff of the Exaltation, that also happens to have Marty Friedman on it. That first riff I had like forever, and it just never found like the right home. And then finally, like I came up with like one other idea that was like, I think that'll fit with that. and it's like this key that unlocks this whole thing. And then once you get 2, then the ball starts rolling. It's almost like writing like a paper, like for, if you're in high school or if you're in college or whatever. Like, I don't know about you, but like for me, like the first paragraph's always the hardest, and then like once you kind of write that first paragraph, you're like, oh, okay, and then you can start to sort of flow after that. So it's getting over that initial hump, and then as soon as there's 2 or 3 riffs there, it's like you just going, because then you can kind of do spin-offs of like each individual riff and see what happens. Or maybe you come up with some wild card ideas that add like a different element to the song that might really be needed. So that's sort of the kind of general process from there in terms of like organizing those initial ideas. And of course, songs don't need to be in the same tempo, right? Which we can talk about, in a little bit if you want, or as like a follow-up question. But I think it's great to have like tempo changes in songs. I like to have like a general overarching tempo. I mean, I think for some bands they make it work where it's very an erratic style. It's like certain death metal bands, like every riff changes tempo and it's like nothing really repeats, and it's just a fucking brutal like onslaught, and then the song is what the song is. But for me, I like to kind of think about maybe like themes and overarching tempos, but it certainly doesn't have to be one tempo the whole way through. I mean, we've definitely done tempo changes in songs to add a different dynamic to that. So it's not like I can only pull from this riffs 200 folder. I might have, out of those 3 riffs that are in the 200 folder, there might be another riff that's in the 150 folder that for whatever reason to my ear fits the general vibe and aesthetic of what's happening there. Again, that's where your voice, your style comes through, like being able to make those stylistic choices, being able to say, this fits with that, even though maybe to someone else they would never even think to put those things together.
So once you've got these kind of like couple riffs that you think fit together really well and you're starting to go after it, you're getting that, like you're saying, you got that first paragraph of your essay and you're inspired now, you're stoked. Do you generally structure the whole thing out before you bring it to the band? Are you writing the lion's share of it, or do you take it and jam it with the other guys at any point before you've got the full idea, or how does that generally work?
Sure. I generally like to bring sort of full ideas to the band, like full-ish songs. That way, kind of people can sort of see the overarching vision. Because sometimes, like, if in your head something's going to change anyway, you bring something in, and like maybe if it doesn't feel right, people start second guessing like the song, like overall. You know what I mean? It's like, no, it's going to make sense. I just need to like change this part or whatever. But certainly songs have been refined. I've brought songs in that I've taken back and changed around because I wasn't happy with them. But generally, I like to kind of give a sort of close-ish to finished product so that the guys can kind of wrap their heads around it and like kind of get an understanding for it. But like I said, I'll certainly change things around if I feel the need to. And I'll listen to the feedback from the other dudes too. Like there's been instances where I've thought something was sick and then just like other dudes were like, maybe we could come up with something better there. But it's also happened the opposite way where like I second guessed a riff. I remember on Vanitas, the chorus riff of that, I really liked it, and for whatever reason, I just like maybe I listened to it too much, and I'm like, is this actually good? And I think I took it out and replaced it with something else. And Brett was like, yo, that's the best part of the song. Like, what are you doing? Like, you gotta put that back in. I'm like, all right, cool. So it can work both ways. Luckily, like I feel like I've got a really great musical connection with all the dudes in the band, and everyone knows where we're coming from. So that's nice. It feels like a good. It allows me to be creative and, like let my voice come through. They give me that space and that opportunity to do that, which is nice. I think there was one other thing that I was going to mention, but I kind of lost my train of thought there. Yeah, I mean, essentially, like, what was, there was like one part of that question. Could you like repeat?
Yeah, I said, you're structuring the songs out. At what point do you bring it to the dudes? Like,
right. So there are exceptions to that. So for example, like if we're jamming at the rehearsal space, like before like a gig, and I just like happen to have a riff that I've been working on, and I'm like really stoked. Like for me, it's just like I can't help it. I want to share it. I want to like jam it out, even if we're not gonna play it for like a year. Like I've done that where I've brought shit in and like just jammed it with just Ash or whatever, like on drums, and like I'll play through and get some ideas going. And for me, like I guess I have a pretty good musical memory. Like I can just like remember shit, and I can envision drum beats over things like pretty much instantaneously. So like it might be a situation where like 8 months later I'll be like, oh, remember that riff we jammed on like a year ago, and it'll be like I think so, and like I'll like play it for him, and I'm like, no, you played this drum beat over that, and then like it'll kind of jog his memory, and I'm like, oh, right, we worked that out. So I'm like, okay,
give me those
cool.
sticks. Let me show you what it was.
Right.
Oh no.
But like so, in moments like that, I like to jam it just to kind of give the guys like a taste of the material, maybe like where my head's at, and it's just fun. Like when you're doing like a rehearsal for like a bunch of songs you've played before. Like it's always fun getting in the room jamming songs with dudes, but like to me there's nothing like playing a riff for like the very first time. Like that just never gets old. It's what keeps me going. Like just hearing something in your head and then like hearing it like get fleshed out in the room, and maybe Brett does a cool little bass fill, or like Ash adds like this like little ripping drum fill, something that I like wouldn't have thought of, and then it's like, oh shit, this is like starting to come to life now, and it's like I had this vision in my head, and now it's out there, and it's other pieces are being added that like really make it pop in a different way, or just like solidify it as like. And then other times it doesn't work, so that's also good to like jam things out too, because you don't want to spend all this time writing a song based off of this like one riff, and then if it doesn't work or doesn't feel right for everybody, then it's like, all right, well, I just did this whole thing based around this one idea, was that a waste of time? I feel like it's never a waste of time, because if anything, you just get better at your songwriting craft, and you have to try new things, and it's totally okay to fail, because who knows, maybe one piece of a riff might kind of come back, like maybe the idea, like the general concept is there, like maybe it's a rhythmic thing, like the rhythm's really good, but just like the note choices for that rhythm like aren't the right thing for that, or vice versa. Like like the notes are cool, but like that dotted quarter note just needs to be a half note, and then all of a sudden it like fits better. So I will bring things into jam.
Cool. So when you're working them out on your own in Logic, like you said you're using, do you how in depth do you demo them? Are you like programming drums? Are you layering, like writing bass lines and stuff? Or do you get like just a skeleton kind of thing?
I never programmed drums. Well, actually, I did it for the Marty Friedman thing, just to kind of like, because that was more his thing, and I wanted to like really present, like put my best foot forward in terms of like the idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've known Ash for so long, and like it really, any drummer that I've worked with, like I just kind of like beatbox like the drum ideas to dudes. Like I've been told I can speak drums very well, so. And I have the rhythmic knowledge to describe oh, that's the and of 3 or something like that, so I'm not just like mumbling things at people. Like I can be like, no, this is a triplet here, and that's a 16th note, or this coming in on the 1E and of 4.
You've got the vocabulary, but do drummers understand you? Because if a lot of drummers don't know that. I bet Ash does. He seems like a guy who knows
luckily,
his shit.
Luckily, Ash is really versed in that stuff and is a master of his craft, so I can discuss those types of things with them. But it is interesting. Like dudes hear things differently sometimes. Like on the song Theater of Horror, the intro riff that's a pickup note. So like I would like send out just the riffs, because like I said, I have the ideas in my mind, and I prefer like doing it like kind of like an old school way. Like I mean, I used to rehearse weekly back when I lived in Boston, but now like when the band was based in Boston, but now we're all kind of spread out, so we don't have the luxury of our drummer lives in Vancouver, right? So like I gotta like go in and like, Skype or Zoom or whatever and kind of just describe this stuff. But I would rather not, like, it feels a little bit too meticulous to like program like the whole thing. Like I'd rather just like record the riffs. Sometimes I'll throw bass on there as well. Like maybe like a general loose idea that we can kind of like fill in the more ornate details of like at a later time, but the general kind of gist of like the root notes or something like that. And not really like worry about lining up too much with like the rhythmic intricacies, because a lot of that stuff like also gets fleshed out in the room. Like Brett's always like listening to like what the kick drum does or something like that, and like, oh, if he's doing like a stab here in the kick drum, I want to like try to accent that like on the bass somehow. It depends on the riff, of course, but so yeah, I'll like hop on Skype. Like, here's the riffs. They'll sit with them. Ash will play me his ideas, or I'll give him my ideas first and just kind of like, yeah, this is and some of the shit like I don't even need to like beatbox out. Like it'll just be literally like, okay, that's a thrash beat. Like this is like a stomp, with like on the snare on every quarter note. This is a halftime beat. You're just gonna kind of hit the 3. So it's like shit like that like Ash can certainly pick up like that. But other more complex things are like how I'm hearing shit. Like there was an instance where, like I said, with the Theater of Horror riff, I sent that out to him, and it's a pickup. It's 1, 2, 3, da 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 da. So it's coming in on the 4. So he heard it as like the 1, I think. So like where the snare placement was, it was like fucking with my head. Like when he sent the thing back, I'm like, this sounds really weird to me. It's like technically like on, but like the whole riff just kind of sounded like flipped around or whatever. So had to kind of go back in, and then you have to sort of like retrain someone's brain like how to like hear something, because if you're hearing something, it's like the intro to Holy Wars, right? Megadeth, right? Like it's 1, 2, 3 da-da-dun, right? It's coming in on the upbeat, but for the longest time I always heard it like 1, 2, 3 4 da-da-dun, 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 da-da-dun. So I always heard that as the downbeat, and then like eventually like heard it like in context of the riff that comes later as a pickup. Now I don't know like how the dudes in Megadeth, how they write, maybe that was like they all collectively just always knew it as that, because of a count off in the practice room or whatever. But just me as a fan hearing something with no context whatsoever, you might be inclined to feel that on the downbeat or whatever. So it can kind of play tricks on your ears with certain things like that in terms of how you're feeling something. But for the most part, like me and Ash like click really well on things, and we're on the same page. So I never feel like the need to micromanage him and like write everything out from a drum program. I think probably some people like to do that. Maybe it's like I don't know, therapeutic or something. But for me, it just is like it feels like tedious, and I'd rather tedious. Like. It feels more organic when I can like talk to someone, even if it's over something like a digital medium like Skype or Zoom. Like it reminds me of like being in the room, coming up with a riff like on the spot, or writing it like a week before, getting super excited and be like, oh yeah, I want the drums to go like this. And I don't know, it just feels like you're kind of like nerding out on like, because I love drums. Like I wish I had like a drum kit and I could like actually like practice and stuff. But yeah, I love having like an idea in my head, and I can like bring it to like someone that's like just a total master of execution like Ash. And sometimes I'll come up with like really hard shit, like like a thrash beat or a blast beat is pretty straightforward. Of course, you can make them complex with different rhythmic things on the kick drum or whatever. But sometimes I'll hit them with with really weird, like, oh yeah, this is a part in 5, and I'm picturing like a really active like hi-hat like groove, like because I grew up listening to like Spastic Inc. and like shit like that, and like those like Bobby Jarzombek like crazy beats where he's like utilizing every single part of the kit, or even like things like Gene Hoglan's done on like some of those Death records where it's like a groove, but he's like adding in like a weird accent on like the ride or something, shit that you like obviously need to like sit down and like work out. It's kind of fun to like throw that shit at like Ash like in the space and just kind of like see him like work it out like in real time, and he'll be like, okay, give me a minute, and he'll like kind of play it and like play it slow, and I find that part of the process like to be fascinating.
At what point do you add the vocals in? Are you thinking about them as you're writing the riffs? Actually, we had a question from the in the chat related to this, so I'm going to shout out Earth to Sean, who says, has there been any specific focus on developing vocals with Revocation? As an avid fan, I notice that's one thing that has evolved immensely. So yeah, in both of those questions about vocals, like how do they fit in?
Yeah, I think I've gotten better as a lyricist. I think I've gotten better as a vocalist. Like in terms of my performance, I think I've gotten better at coming up with just interesting sort of rhythmic lines. I guess we'll call it phrasing, right? I think I've maybe come into my own more. Like when it's just like any band, like especially when you need to kind of split duties between vocals and guitar. As I've progressed and as the band's progressed and kind of come into its own, and I've kind of embraced the frontman role more, and have been kind of inspired to sort of take on that role. I think I've naturally just thought more about the vocals, about the vocal delivery, and yeah, like I mean, we spend so much time trying to be creative with the music. Like obviously, like we've never wanted the vocals to be an afterthought. But I think I've just gotten better at coming up with cool patterns, things I haven't done before. I mean, the new single "Diabolical Majesty" I'm particularly proud of. I think like the chorus has got some cool, like rhythmic phrases to it that like kind of go over the bar line a little bit, and like they have a cool flow. So, but you still want to keep it heavy sometimes and like straightforward as well. But as far as like I need the music to be done in order to start like working on the like I've never come up with like a vocal pattern first or anything like that and like written a riff around that. Like that's like never happened to me. I've come up with like rhythms for riffs that when I didn't have a guitar around and I was like walking down the street and like just like pull my phone out and like do a voice memo really quick. I've done that where I like speak the rhythm of the riff into the phone. And then come back and figure out whatever that translates to later on down the line. But yeah, I've never written like vocals first. I mean, even from a lyrical, I'll have what I will have is I'll have song titles. So I'll get like a shit ton of like song titles, like in like saved in like a note in my phone, and like I'll let those kind of maybe like inform like a general lyrical concept from there. But yeah, I need to have the music written, and then that way I can just start to hear shit, just like I would hear like a drum beat or a bass line or whatever. Like I need to have that music there to like inspire me to start like writing vocals. And then it's like once I start on the vocals and the lyrics, like again, that's another puzzle that needs to be solved. I mean, when I was, maybe this is pivoting into like the recording process too soon. I don't know if you're going to talk about that at all, but
Go for
Nether Heaven. But when I was because I engineered everything myself besides the drums, I kind of took a little bit of a different approach to it where like, some of the stuff I was sort of writing like in the studio because like there was no clock, I wasn't like on someone else's time. It was all just my thing. So I'm like, let me use the energy and inspiration of being in the studio to like help push me in different directions. So, I mean, I would wake up, it was a lot of work, but I'll always look back super fondly on this moment, I think, for the rest of my life. But I recorded the whole record at my bass player's place in Virginia, and he's got like a backyard, and it's it's chill. Like I would just like wake up, like have a coffee, and I would just like do laps in his backyard. I mean, I probably look like a fucking crazy person, but I was just like working on like vocal patterns and like lyrics and like changing things around, and like I just like went from like song to song to song, and like sometimes multiple songs. Like I'd get like like a verse and a half of lyrics for one song, and then feel like maybe I hit like a little bit of a creative wall, and then like pivot to this other thing, and like I got that bridge I got to finish up lyrically, and I was just like every day just like on it, same way of how I came up with the album title. It was just like every day I was like thinking about these different combinations of words or different, like all these different things that like just were at the forefront of my mind, kind of like all at once. Like I got to track the record, I got to do the, I didn't even write any of the solos yet. Like normally I write the solos like, like a month in advance too. But this was like, well, I'm just gonna like do them like in the studio and kind of like, like kind of pre-pro it out for like almost like in real time. Like, okay, like here's a solo, like pre-pro it out, like feel good with it, feel confident with it, and then like track it. So anyway, I think I jumped around there a whole bunch. But
no, this is all gold, man.
Yeah.
Is there usually, do you wait for the complete song structure to be done, or do you have most maybe just a verse and a chorus before you start writing the vocals? I mean, it sounds like in this case, if you're in the studio already, you probably got most of it. But
yeah, I wait till the end. I kind of need to, I think, because like I need to let the music kind of speak to me and inspire me and like almost like inform which way I should go. Because I can't just like, even though I have like a bunch of song titles, like it's weird. Like again, this goes into like where your own personal taste comes in. But like, in theory, if you've got 10 songs and none of them have lyrics, in theory, if you have 10 song titles, any one of those song titles could fit with any one of those songs, right? But for me, that's just like not the case. Like when I look at the new like Diabolical Majesty, that's that song. Like I knew like, yeah, that fits for that. It doesn't fit for anything else. Like Galleries of Morbid Artistry, that one fit exactly for that song. I even try to be like creative with the song titles. Like I was having trouble like coming up with the song title for track 2, just because it had like, so it was fucking heavy, but like it went in like some different directions, and I wasn't sure like what would encapsulate it best. But then when I came up with the title "Lessons in Occult Theft," it just was like, oh, that's that song right there. So it the music needs to inform me before I think I start writing the lyrics. I need to be like inspired to like pick up the pen, because I'm not like, I don't just like write lyrics in general. Like I've got so many projects going on. Like I'd rather be honing my craft at guitar. Like I don't keep like a journal or like a diary or anything like that. It's more like I'll keep track of song titles in my mind, but I think I'd rather spend that time like reading someone else's writing and getting like inspiration like from there.
This is the diary of Dave Davidson.
Yeah.
Dear diary, today I wrote a song about burning lots of churches to the ground. I don't know how I feel about it. No, this is what I'm looking for, man. Like, no stone unturned. This is all very cool. 'Cause like I said, like I often assume that people do it the same way. Everyone's just got a notes app full of lyric ideas that they write or whatever. But a lot of people wait till the very end. We've had people on here saying they write in the studio, write the lyrics in the studio as they're like record, like right before they're tracking it, which to me is insane, like like crazy pants. But like, I mean, if you got the time and you can do it, sometimes it works. Whatever your process is. Some people need that urgency or whatever. But so it sounds like you're waiting to get the inspiration from the full song, pairing it up with a title that inspires you, that matches the feeling of it. That's cool. Does that ever become a problem when it's time to play them and sing them at the same time? That's the thing that would worry me.
Yeah, that is always a problem. Yeah, I think I've just embraced like the chaos with that, and I'm like, yeah, no, it definitely is a concern when I'm doing it. Like, I'm like, am I gonna be able to sing this? Like, I don't even know, but like, I guess you just practice slowly, like really like kind of work it out. But there's definitely parts of songs where I've like kicked myself afterwards. I'm like, why did I write like such a contrary like vocal rhythm to like what they could, like, it sounds cool, but that's at the end of the day, it's like, does it sound cool? Does it like move me? Like, consequences be damned. Like I'll figure it out when I get to it. Or I'll make, someone else play the harder part and I'll play like the easier part. Like but that's part of like composing too. Like on A Debt Ode to the Grave, that's just the first song that comes to my mind. But like the chorus is like a crazy arpeggio thing, and like I wanted to have like beefy chords like underneath it. To like just like to fit like sonically, not even thinking like, oh, I'll play the easy part, but like I wanted to have that like beefiness underneath the arpeggio to like fill out the sound. And like as I'm like playing the arpeggios in the studio, I'm like, yeah, I know which part like I'm gonna play live and sing.
Diabolical Majesty has some crazy lead parts going on during the chorus, or like it's like a riffy fast thing.
Yeah, well, one guitar is like kind of like
one.
a DBD, like, which I feel like is like I can maybe just go a little bit more autopilot on that. But even like the other part, I don't think it's that hard to sing. It's an endurance test. It's just trem picking the whole time. But I find like singing over trem picking isn't like really hard because you're just kind of going through. It's more like if you've got like a weird rhythm in the guitar where there's syncopation or something like that where it's more difficult, or the vocals are doing something different. But if you are just kind of like cranking along with like a whatever 16 note triplet, whatever like the trem pick ends up working out to at that particular tempo, it's difficult from an endurance standpoint, but not necessarily from like a rhythmic standpoint. I've found it's more like those like really ornate like things, like because if you're thinking about trem picking, generally it's like either like a washy chord that you're doing like kind of maybe like a black metal style kind of riff, or it's like a single note that you're kind of moving from one section to another. Like in the case of Diabolical, like I am doing arpeggios, but the trem pick is like it's not like every single note is or every single rhythmic value is like a different note. Like I'm on the same note for like a beat at a time before it kind of moves. So it's like a little bit easier to kind of tackle.
Yeah, it's not.
But I think I'm probably
crazy...
gonna play like the DBD part anyway. Just I think because rhythmically I don't know. Just kind of picturing play it live. Like that's another part about composing though too. Like I actually sometimes don't know what I'm gonna do live, like until like we actually start like rehearsing like in a room.
Yeah, I'm sure there are songs that you've maybe never even stuff you've recorded and maybe never even had to play live.
Right.
Like you're like, well, I'll put in the time when cross that bridge when we get to it.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? Are we even going to play the song live? Right. It's like it's a cool song on the record, but like maybe it won't translate well live. You never know.
Well, this sort of begs a question that actually someone in the chat, same guy, Earth to Sean, thank you for your donation and your question. He asks, will you guys most likely continue as a trio with a fill-in for live performance, or are you seeking another guitarist? My question is that, but for the songwriting part, do you this is your first one as a trio in a while? Yeah. Are you still thinking in terms of writing for two guitars when you're writing these? Obviously, you recorded two guitar parts, but when you're are you considering that, or what's the deal? What's the deal with the other guitar player situation? I think is the short version.
Yeah, right now we've got a fantastic touring guitar player, Noah. He's super shredder. Anyone that saw us on the Cannibal tour saw him there. We're not in a rush to like confirm like an official member or anything like that at this time. But Noah's going to be doing the Australian tour that we got coming up. He's on the US tour that we got coming up. And he's working out great so far. So he's definitely going to be with us like for the foreseeable future. We just don't want to rush into anything. As far as writing goes, I'm 100%. I'm thinking about writing for two guitar players. You've heard the record. There's harmonies like all over the fucking place on the new album. So, I always knew that we weren't going to go back to a 3-piece, even though we lost Dan. So, I think at the time we didn't have Noah like maybe he was like, on our radar, but like it wasn't like I was just focused on, because we had people hitting us up like, oh, I want to audition this and that. I'm like, I got to record this record. Like I'm not even thinking about, and it was still like the pandemic too. I'm like, I don't even know when we're going to go on tour. So like, let me just record this. I knew I was, when the time came, we would find someone. But yeah, it's not like I was thinking, oh, we're a trio now. Like I have to like write accordingly for that. I think we're just like a 2-guitar band. I don't know, who knows? Maybe maybe one, for nostalgic purposes, we'll go back to a 3-piece. But I think it just sounds, for the style that we have, writing with 2 guitars just sort of makes more sense. I mean, even like every song has a solo, and like almost every solo that we have has like rhythm guitar players, or rhythm guitar playing, I should say, like behind it. So, that sonically, I think just fills out the space a little bit more. It just fucking sounds heavier too.
I've always like kind of enjoyed the pulling the rug when it's just guitar over bass, but at the same time, like, that's probably because I'm a guitar player and I want to hear really what's going on. And right. The average person will probably it'll hit harder when it's, when it's got a more full thing. Yeah. Like a full foundation with the rhythm guitar and everything does sound better. Right. Really.
Yeah. I mean, even on old Revocation songs that had bass underneath when we were trio style, live, like we'll have like our, in this case, Noah, like I'll work out like some kind of like riff that's like either exactly what the bass is doing or kind of complementary to it to fill it out. So we're actually like adding guitars back in for the live. But I think it's cool when bands do different shit live too. I mean, that's kind of like the whole. I mean, you can always listen to the exact version of the record. I mean, we try to get it as close as possible, but we'll do different things that are like live specific. Like, this is, I guess it kind of fits into like the songwriting process. It's like more like how songs translate live, but like we'll come up with like intros, or we'll do different things that like weren't on the record, like on the Vancouver show. Like we did Crumbling Imperium, which was off of Great Is Our Sin, and on the record it just like kicks right in. And thinking live, like, okay, we got like over an hour of music to play, like how can we do different things and like add to the set. And I just kind of came up with the idea, like, it was like we had 3 days of rehearsal and then the show or something like that, and like on the third day I was like, what if I just like take this like lead guitar line from Crumbling Imperium that's like, it's basically just like I don't know, we'll call it like a death metal Thunderstruck or something like that, like it's just like kind of really fast like pull-offs and like on the D string, like moving it around to different notes. It's like, what if I just like played that like kind of solo and like went through like with like an effect on it or whatever, and like gonna give it this like atmospheric kind of sound. And then once it gets around the full cycle, boom, then we kick in with like the whole band. And we did it, and I was like, oh, this is sick. And then you're like, fuck, I wish that was on the record. But that's kind of the cool thing about live and about having a back catalog. You can go in and change these songs up like ever so slightly, or add little intros or outros.
It could be on a live album.
Right.
Now you've got a really good reason to do it.
Right. Or on what's it called? That Which Consumes All Things. I think we started doing it when we were on tour with Killswitch Engage in Europe. I think that was the first tour we started on, but it might have been before then. But I don't know. I just had the idea, like, because the ending outro is like super heavy, but it's still like it's not like super fast, but it's not like super slow either. It's like kind of more of like a mid-tempo kind of banger like riff. I was like, oh, like what if we just like get like super ignorant with it and just like slow it down and like just like go like full like caveman style on it. And yeah, we did that on like the Cannibal tour, and just like really leaned in, like just super slow, like Ash is like doing like super fast kicks underneath. We even changed it up a couple times since we first introduced the idea, so like it obviously had some staying power, and like we like morphed it even more. But now again, I'm like, fuck, I wish that was on the record.
Yeah, I think of like old ass bands, like classic rock bands, who would write these songs, definitely nothing nearly as complex as any of the things that we're talking about, but they'd take them on the road for like 2 years before they ever got a chance to record. And by that time, they'd worked all that shit out. They'd done tried all those things, and then, then they like wind up with that on the record. And I think that's kind of a cool way to do it, that like nobody really has any reason to do it like that anymore. I don't think there's much else about doing it that way that has value, but that specific thing that you're talking about, like working shit out, getting to try it live before you have to record it, that does have that kind of cool benefit.
Yeah, my only thing to that, and I think maybe the reason a reason we don't do it, I can't speak for everybody, but I would assume other people have the same mentality, is you want to put the best version of a song forward, and if it could really just live in that one moment that night, I'd be okay with it. But you play a new song,
Everybody's
people are
got their phones
film
out.
it. You've already spoiled the surprise, you know what I mean? So, and then there's YouTube videos of it. So like what you're trying to do, it's almost like like a stand-up comic, like working out material like in smaller clubs before they take it on the road, and they see what works, see what doesn't. But yeah, it's one of those things where I would just be nervous that it would just immediately get out there, and then everyone's hearing this like shitty cell phone quality video footage of something, and you've kind of blown the surprise, the debut, if you will.
Yeah, that sucks. It's a weird time that we're in for that kind of a thing. Like if you do something publicly and you're any kind of a public figure, it will probably be documented and spread around, and you've got a lot of fans waiting for new material, so they're hungry for that kind of thing, and they'll eat up a cell phone video of you guys playing it live, and then
and then people will comment on it and be like, this sucks, because it like sounds bad, but they won't they don't even like are thinking like, oh, it's good. You're hearing of a flip phone, like a Razor flip phone version of it. But what can you do?
Well, let's talk about some lyrics. Let's talk about the lyrics to the first single that you guys dropped, Diabolical Majesty. What is the song about?
Sure.
And how did you come to how the lyrics are?
So the album in general, like as a concept, I've been liking doing kind of loose concepts on our records for a little bit, like Great Is Our Sin, I feel like had like a common thread that carried through. Outer One certainly had that cosmic horror, Lovecraftian kind of theme in the lyrics and the artwork. So I remember like even before like we had some of the songs written, I was like, I think I want to go to hell on the new record. I like the idea of like, we went to outer space, now we're gonna go to hell. So I wanted to have some hellish themes, and I think you can do a lot with that concept for sure. Whether it's just kind of your occult demonic kind of imagery that fits so well to match the demonic essence of the music, or things that might have more of like a modern day kind of political commentary element to them. So that kind of is what I guess Diabolical Majesty sort of lives in both those realms, right? It's guys like very kind of demonic lyrical imagery, but underneath that is a little bit of political commentary. It's essentially about the clash between Satanic Temple and religious leaning politicians in different areas. Essentially they're sort of trolling the religious right, but I think it's deeper than that, and it really talks about like free speech, and if you're going to have separation of church and state in this country, you can't put up like the statue of the 10 Commandments on government property, and then because then you open it up to like, okay, you can either have it all or you can't have any, but you can't pick and choose and just say one, because then it looks like we don't have a separation of church and state. So I think that's kind of what they're getting at, and for some people it might be like, oh, well, it's just a statue, who gives a shit, but a bit of a slippery slope there towards like putting people in power that might really affect how laws are governed in this country. So I think it's definitely important to address certain issues with your lyrics and to think about like a bigger picture type of thing. So as much as I love writing in a more fantasy kind of element, I think it's also important to discuss things that are happening in real time in politics, or it could be in your personal life or whatever. But like that to me was something that was sort of inspiring, and I felt the need to discuss it, and it felt very relevant to the times today, especially given, I'm not going to turn this into a political rant, because we're just kind of talking about songs and stuff, but given certain things that have transpired, in the past like couple of years here, certainly seems like even like as society becomes more secular, it seems like power is being more consolidated, with people of more of a religious sort of mindset. And, I think all music that I like is protest music in some way, whether it's metal or jazz or punk. I mean, even, classical hip hop, like I think, speaking truth to power is important. And that was sort of my general inspiration for that. But I didn't want to be like super heavy handed with it either, where it's like too on the nose. I mean, I'm happy to discuss the lyrical inspiration, but I also want people to kind of read the lyrics and like have it feel maybe a little bit more like poetic or whatever, and less like, I'm not trying to like necessarily shove like a ideology down anyone's throat either. I want it to be like have that metal like even if you don't give a shit about politics like at all, like I want the lyrics just like maybe still like hit you in a certain way.
Yeah, well, the thing that you said about like it being like political or personal or whatever, like I think there's a point at which there's an immense crossover, because it could very quickly become personal if it's an issue of personal freedoms and liberties and your ability to exist in a society. And
it already has become personal for personal. About half the country right now with what just happened in the Supreme Court.
It's a big deal, and it becomes personal, like you're saying, like and you can talk about big things. That's the point of art, to make some kind of a statement, even if it's not super specifically political or personal or whatever. Like it can be personal without it being about your relationship, with your significant other or whatever.
Right. And I heard a quote from a really fantastic guitar player that I'm a big fan of. His name's Nir Felder, and he said, all music is political. Because a lot of people said like, oh, keep politics out of music or whatever. And he said, all music is political. There's certain societies out there that like, you can't freely express yourself. You can't write certain music that you want to write in different areas, and you can't like, you're going to receive like a ton of backlash or whatever. So like, I think all art has an inherently political slant to it, if you really get down to like the nitty gritty of it. Otherwise it's just like, fluff, like, it's just purely for entertainment value, and that's it. And there's no, maybe the art side of it kind of it isn't there. And it's, but I want my music to like music inherently is entertaining, but like I want it to have a deeper level to it. I want it to kind of move me in different things. Like I think like good art should confront the listener in different ways and make you think about things in like a different light. And certainly like as a kid growing up, like reading lyrics of some of my favorite bands, like coming out of like Catholic school, right? Like having that mental programming there for like a while, like, sort of, believing in like, God and like all these things, because like that's what you kind of grew up like learning about. And then like, you kind of go into the dark side a little bit, like learn, like a little bit more, you have more life experience, and then you like see people like talking about these things, and it's like, oh, like these are some concepts that I've like maybe been wrestling with like myself, and here is like someone like just like fully like putting it out there, and like, this guy didn't like burst into flames or whatever, or get like struck by lightning, like kind of makes you, call into question some of your ideologies. And, I think it's good to kind of like check yourself from time to time and, learn new things. And I think art is a good way of, exposing yourself to different kind of ideologies that might challenge your preconceived notions of something. I think it was Bertolt Brecht that said like, because normally people say like art is a mirror that reflects society, right? But he said art is not a mirror that reflects society. It's a hammer to which you shape society. So I always thought that was kind of cool.
I like that a lot better.
Who doesn't like smashing shit?
Because it's the hammer that smashes the mirror. The mirror is actually something else. I don't know.
Let's not get too deep here.
But that's good stuff. In that sort of in that same vein, I want to talk about anything that maybe that inspired you musically and lyrically as you were making this album. Anything that you were listening to that that sent things in a new direction or gave you some cool ideas or anything while you were writing this stuff?
Oh man, yeah, I listened to just so much shit. Like, I mean, everything from jazz to death metal to classical music. Like, it really is. It's hard to pinpoint like one specific thing. I mean, sometimes I'll go the complete like opposite way when I'm working on something, and like you like need like a palate cleanser. I mean, like like all I listened to like over like the summer while I was recording the record was like Cobra Man and like Donny Benet. I think like that was just like I was just bumping that shit.
What are those? Tell us.
Cobra Man is sick. The song Heat Wave, that's actually like why I named like the studio that Brett's home studio like Heat Wave Recordings, was because of that song. Yeah, I don't know, it's just like a great, just check it out, just listen to Cobra Man Heat Wave. It's like poppy, like maybe like there's keyboards, like it depends on like what you're listening to. Some of the shit sounds like disco-y, some of the shit sounds like a weird like bizarro Judas Priest song. They're just like a really like fun band. I think they're like going on tour right now. So anyway, like, yeah, shout out to Cobra Man. And then Donny Benet is just like what can I say about Donny Benet? He's really just an incredible artist. He's a sex god. He's just smooth, his insane bass player. It's just love making music,
Gotcha.
But it's funky too. It's like dancey. I think he just he's putting good energy out into the world, and yeah, I want to do a Revocation Donny Benet world tour at some point. We'll see if we can make that happen. It'd be cool.
You just put it out into the world. You're manifesting right now.
Or Donny, just like, if I could do a collaboration with Donny Benet, that would be cool. Like if he needs like a guitar player for like a tour, I might cancel Revocation tour just to like go on tour with Donny Benet.
Donny, if you're out there, if you're listening, brother, let's make this happen. I mean, weirder shit's happened. I mean,
I'm just throwing it out there. Donny, give me a call. But anyway, I'm big. So those were like way outside the realm of metal. I just wanted some music that was like, I don't know, gonna like amp me up. Like, sometimes you just like hear one of those songs and like you could listen to it. Like, that's what I love about music, and I never want to lose that feeling of like, you discover like a new thing, and like you just like you could listen to the song 100 times and you're just like addicted to it. And like that was what drove me as a musician, like in the beginning, and it still drives me to this day. And it's not like I find like a new band that I'm obsessed with like every single day, but sometimes, I don't know, just the vibe just hits me right, and it's just something that I need in that time. And I can't even say that maybe had I heard it like in a different setting or point in my life, that maybe I wouldn't have been like as like jazzed on it as I was. But for that time period, like, oh my God, I was just fucking obsessed with that Cobra Man Heat Wave song. And the video is fucking incredible.
I love hearing about metal dudes listening to not metal. And that's usually what I get when I ask that question. Something that's not so fucking intense is what they're listening to when they're making it or when they're on tour.
Right.
So,
but like like the new Cannibal record that they put out, like that's a banger. Like, I checked out like the new Cosmic Putrefaction record is great. There's some cool bands that I found like during quarantine. I kind of went on like a little bit of like a death metal resurgence, I think, and ended up like checking out like a bunch of bands that like that like weren't really like on my radar, that really inspired me. So Sunless, that band rules. Um, yeah, there's like so many cool bands. Gorophilia, I think they're from like Finland or something. That record's sick. Um, yeah, there's always dudes out there being creative, which I appreciate.
Let's talk a little bit about the jazz influence. Because I've seen you rip some jazz and been like, oh shit. Oh no, you can really do the thing. It's not just like I studied jazz. Like I was a jazz performance major at Berkeley for the 1 year that I was there, and I studied jazz for 2 other years, basically on a purely academic level. I couldn't fucking play you a respectable chorus of Autumn Leaves if you put a gun to my head. Like I I just can't really do. I just wanted to learn all the inner workings of it so I could make cooler and more interesting metal. And it seems like that you've done that. Maybe give us an idea of like how it shapes the way that you look at making riffs, if it does at all. I don't know, maybe you turn it off entirely, but I can hear a lot of like what I would consider much more interesting harmony, chord voicings, melody creation. Everything that I hear in your music to me sounds like it has at least a little bit of that in it, but I want to know how you're thinking about it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think so much of that stuff, you learn it so that you like kind of don't think about it when you're actually like creating stuff. I mean, I can point to different instances, here or there, like where like, I'm using like jazz voicings, in a metal context, right? Like drop twos or drop threes, stuff that like, unless you kind of like sat down with like a chord book and like learn them, like you wouldn't come across them in metal. But to me, that's just kind of part of my like vocabulary now. You know what I mean? So I don't even really sort of think about it like that. It's just, an E minor 7 chord or an E minor major 7 chord or a D7 altered chord, like throw some distortion on it, play around. Like but I always had that mindset. Like when I was first getting like my chord sheets, like for comping, when I was in high school. I mean, I'd throw distortion on and start like riffing around, like, oh, this minor 7 flat 5 voicing is kind of cool. Like that's like no one really uses that, or I don't hear that often. Like it sounds gnarly, like it sounds dissonant and like weird and evil. Like why can't I use this? So, I started, just kind of always having an open mind to that, and like I started exploring that more and more, like in high school. And then I just kind of naturally sort of started to like take hold in my playing, but it's not necessarily like, oh, I gotta sit down and like write a death metal song with jazz chords or something like that. I think it's just the more general influence, I think, is with my ear. Like I think a lot of bands maybe don't even realize they're like in one key the whole time. Like they're just kind of like always naturally pull down to whatever the lowest string is. So you're in the key of B or in the key of E, and even some of like the tropes, right? Like the 1 to flat 6 chord change that gets used like all the time. Like I think I kind of know what to actively like want to like avoid. Or even if I do like a 1 to flat 6, like I might, like alter the flat 6 chord to make it like not like to actually do like a modal interchange thing there. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually like fully changing a key, like instead of, I don't know how music nerdy you want to get, but if I have E minor and I go to C major, right? Like, it would, the jazz chords for that would be like E minor 7 and then like C major 7. But, if you go to like C dominant 7, then you're doing like modal interchange, like the 5 of the E, you flat that down and that becomes, there's like a line there or something. That becomes like the flat 7 of C. So like, you're naturally kind of taking it out of the key, so it maybe is like a familiar chord change, but you're using like what would be maybe considered in a kind of rudimentary way, doing like a reharm of that chord change. So like learning about reharmonization as it pertains to jazz is like those kind of more like overarching like general concepts, I think are definitely like in the subconscious of my mind for sure. But like. But although sometimes like on like on the new record, it's such like an Easter egg. I don't know. Like actually, we'll be hearing it here first, I guess. But the guitar harmony. There's a swell in the song "God Forsaken." I think you said you heard the whole record, so I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. But there's a section where "God Forsaken" like breaks down, and there's like this creepy harmony that comes in. To me, it like has almost like a Metallica, like "Injustice for All" feel when they had those kind of epic like harmony swells. But I like basically took a piece of that. The melody that's that piece is like a piece from like Joe Henderson's Recordame that I like added like weird like harmonies to, and just was like fucking around with one day and was like, oh, like that melody is really cool. And like I'm not doing it like in a swing feel, and I think like he's coming in like maybe like on a different part of the beat. Like I think I'm coming in on like a downbeat, and his was coming in on an upbeat. But I just remember being like, oh, that's like a cool, like it's just a cool melody. I think the shape of it looked kind of cool on guitar, and I just started messing around with that, and then like added like a fourth harmony to it, and then it was like, oh, this actually sounds like this weird bizarro like Metallica kind of like thing, and it like. So I like taking some of the jazz influence and like completely disguising it. You know, like sometimes bands are like, oh, we play jazz metal, and it's like really like on the nose or whatever, and like, you know, or it's guys that like, you know, think it's jazz just because they went to like a clean channel like on their amp or something.
Yeah.
And like, you know, sometimes like that
Fucking
can be cool, and sometimes it's just like kind of heavy handed and like, you know, maybe trying to like force like a square peg into a round hole sort of thing. But for me, like, yeah, I like to almost like go the other way and make it like not even like obvious in the least bit, and in fact like kind of like disguise it and like make it like sort of metal first and foremost, so it has this kind of otherworldly, almost like alien like sound. You can't even like put your finger on where it came from. So it's fun to do that. I mean, the intro to Fathomless Catacombs, those are like, I think I took that chord change from like a Wayne Shorter tune, like it's a small piece of it, but I mean Wayne Shorter is one of my favorite jazz musicians of all time. I mean, he's a living legend. I think I saw him play at his 80th birthday party, 80th birthday concert at like Symphony Hall in Boston. Joe Lovano played, and I think it was Brian Blade on drums, who's just fucking so good. And he was up there just like ripping, like 80 years old. His solos are amazing, but for me, like what I love about Wayne's playing is like his composition, like his chord choices and like his arranging and his melodies, like just super unique. If you get a chance, listen to his record, "The All-Seeing Eye" with Herbie Hancock. It's like it's so deep.
Writing this down.
So yeah, finding influence, because I think sometimes people like they think like, oh, it's jazz and it's like, you know, gonna be some like easy listening shit, or like they maybe like only know like you know, like a tune out of like the real book, like that's like more of a nice tune, like Autumn Leaves, for example, and like, you know, maybe they hear like a radio version of it, right? But like, you know, you hear fucking Keith Jarrett play Autumn Leaves and it's like frightening. Like it's like how, like I have a transcription of it, like from like I think it's his Still Live record. Like the solo is like 27 pages long, and like he never runs out of ideas.
Yeah.
Like he's just going, and the ideas are so cool and hip and like weird chromaticism, and you know, because a great jazz musician can take like a basic form like a blues and make it sound like the most fucked up thing you've ever heard. So like that's really kind of where I get inspiration from. That it's not about, because you could have chord changes and you like play it and you're like, why don't I sound, you know, I'm playing the chords, like why doesn't it sound as good as, you know, when someone says it? Well, it's like, well, they're reharmoning it, and their sense of rhythm is super hip, and they're adding in all these altered tensions. So like before you know it, like, you know, the F7 chord, you know, there's no root in it, you know, it's got a flat 9 and a sharp 9, and like a, you know, you could play a chord that's just all altered tensions, and that could just be the chord. So there's not even like any chord tones in it, and it's just like this like cluster of tension and chaos, but then it might resolve beautifully to the next chord. And also, like, I think seeing how, you know, jazz musicians takes on like the rules, and they kind of throw, because like when you learn jazz, like, you know, it seems very academic and there's all these rules, and especially if you're doing arranging, like when I took my big band arranging course, it was like, you gotta, you know, think about this register, and like you can't write below this certain octave. But, you know, I see like, you know, like Gilad Hexelman's a friend of mine. He's like one of the best jazz guitar players in the world. And like, you know, he'll throw these really gnarly, like low end voicings sometimes on things. And it just sounds like just super like, you know, gnarly, but it like works perfectly. And you're like, wow, that's so cool. And it's like, wow, these dudes, like, they break the rules, and then that broken rule like then becomes the new rule, you know. So it always is evolving, and it's always sort of challenging itself. And I love a type of music that like the whole point is for it to constantly evolve. I think that's why I love jazz so much, because metal is much more like classical to me. The whole point is to execute it as close to the record as possible, minus the little cool things you do, like I was mentioning earlier, where you change things around. But like, yeah, when you get like when you see like a tour of like a, you know, group of jazz musicians, and like, you know, you're getting a truly unique experience that night, because the shit that they played the night before, the night before that, and the night before that was all different. Like no one's taking the same solo.
It's sort of the complete opposite idea. Like if you were to go see a jazz artist and they played it exactly the same as the album, it would be insane. You'd be like, what the fuck just happened? You don't want to hear that. It's supposed to be improvised. You'd feel like you were cheated.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and you wouldn't be playing with dudes for too long after that, because like, you know,
I think there's like a built-in irreverence in jazz for the, like, because it sort of grew out of like them trying to make these fucking basically show tunes like more interesting and danceable, like playing songs that people knew and then like fucking around with them, getting really good at fucking around, and like, and you have to extend it so that people will keep dancing, you know, like way fucking back in the day or whatever, like, and it just sort of like grew out of that, and adding blues influences and shit. Like you're saying, the blues note, like the flat 3 on a dominant 7 chord, right? That's kind of like the thing you're talking about. It was like this fuck you. It was like, hey, like, you're supposed to play this note? Oh, too bad. We're playing this other one instead. And after a while, it becomes the sound. It becomes cool.
Yeah. I mean, I have explored stuff like, I'm such a student of jazz, and I love to learn about it. And, you know, I'll go down like these different lectures, rabbit holes, and listen to dudes, you know, talk about their approaches. And like, I mean, you could, like, I think it was like George Garzone, who's like, you know, he was from the Massachusetts scene, he's a monster saxophone player. He has like a whole crazy approach to playing, which is like a triadic chromatic approach. It's just super out there, but he's you know, one of the most unique saxophone players alive today. And you know, he was like giving a clinic somewhere in like, I might have, like Russia or wherever, like some overseas thing, and he was like, oh yeah, like, he's like, I can play like a flat 9 on like a major 7 chord, like on a ballad, and like have it sound hip. You know, I'm like, damn, that's crazy. I heard like you know, it was like someone like had uploaded like audio from like a Pat Metheny lesson, and he was just talking about like rhythm and how important like rhythm was, and like chromaticism. And, you know, I mean, Pat Metheny is like, he's an incredible jazz guitar player, as maybe some of you guys know out there. And he was just saying, like, I forget what he said, but he was basically like, yeah, like I could play a chromatic scale and it'll sound like some hip shit. And like he played a chromatic, like I had to stop it and rewind it, because I'm like, there's no way that was just a chromatic scale. But it was, but it was just like, he like, the way he articulated it, and like I think he put like a couple little like pauses in there, and I'm like, I fucking can't believe that. And, you know, you go down the line of any of these guys, like Alan Holdsworth, you know, watched, you know, some of his, you know, instructional videos, clinic type things, where it's like, he'll play something and I'll be like, that was the most, what scale was that? That was the craziest scale I've ever heard. And I'll do this in lessons too, like to like kind of illustrate like a point, like that it's not necessarily like, because people will be like, oh, I want to learn exotic modes and all this shit. It's like, that doesn't necessarily make your playing more exotic. If you approach a mode, doesn't matter how exotic it is, if you just only approach it going straight up and down, and you don't think about, you know, doing different sequences of it, or actually learning the harmony that's built off of every single note, you're not getting nearly as much mileage out of it as you could. And yeah, I remember like he played this scale, and I was like, that's the craziest scale I've ever heard. And he's like, yeah, so that's C major. And I'm like what? You know, and like had to like listen to it again, like actually like still didn't believe him. I'm like, he's making some shit up in there. Like there's some weird chromatic trickery that he just doesn't. And like I'm like, no, those are the notes of a C major scale. He's starting on the 7th and ending on the 9, and he's doing a string skip in there. He got all of the notes in, but it was just through his Holdsworthian lens that he viewed that scale, and that's why it's not so much about the scale. It's about it's like the alphabet, right? You know, like we have all these letters, but there's a difference between, you know, Dr. Seuss and Shakespeare, right? You know, it's like what you do with the organization of those letters that you create your art out of. And that really opened up my eyes. There was another quote, I forget, I think it was from a painter, but he essentially said, like, you know, art is not about finding new landscapes to paint. It's about looking at the same landscape through a different set of eyes, right? And I think that kind of touches on this, where it's like, it's not necessarily like finding, I mean, yes, the more you know, the more scales you know, the more, you know, exotic arpeggios, like, sure, like, that's not going to like hurt at all. That's going to make you, you know, have more ideas to pull from. But if you approach it the same way every single time, and you're not going to get a new result out of that. It's just going to sound like, you know, your same approach that you've always taken. Yeah, it might sound, if you're playing melodic minor versus Dorian, it might sound like a little bit more exotic because you're hearing the major 7, but you're always just going straight up and straight down. You're not doing any other cool shit where you're exploring the arpeggios of the scale or writing and creating harmony with that, and you know, finding ways to make melodies from that scale that aren't just straight up and down. So yeah, that really opened my ears and eyes to like thinking about like, oh shit, like how I organize these notes is super important, because you could make a major scale sound like the most exotic shit someone's ever heard. And like I said, I've done that same exact thing in lessons before, and it's like blown students' minds. They're like, that was that. I'm like, yeah, it's just, that's a major scale. So like think about like what you could do with even like a triad or something like that if you reorganize the notes in a different way, or you know, a 7th chord or whatever. So definitely fascinating shit.
Yeah. that's one way to put it. Holy shit. That's a rabbit hole. That's a lifelong rabbit hole that you could go down.
Yeah.
I mean, and you should. It would be a worthy sacrifice of your entire life to learn just all that shit. You know what I mean? Like, makes you better. It's more like, goddamn. See, like, now you got me like, oh fuck, now I gotta go hear more about this shit.
Right.
These are all like basic ideas that I understand, but at the same time, it's like, oh boy, trying to grasp that perspective that you're talking about could be a lifelong study. It's like,
and you'd never reach the top of that mountain anyway. You know, like that's the coolest thing about music to me, is it's like, you know, like who wants to play like a video game that you beat in 5 minutes, right? Like you want something that has like replay value, and I think music has like the ultimate replay value, because like as soon as you think you know everything, you know, that's when I think your artistic self kind of like withers, right? Like I'll be a student of music for the rest of my life, and dudes that are way far surpassing me in terms of their knowledge and everything like that. You know, like Anthony Braxton or something like that. Like it's like he refers to himself as like a student of music, and it's like, you know, he's professor, and you know, like toured the world, and it's just like this is creative genius, and like, you know, and he's, you know, an older gentleman, but it's like he still considers himself a student of music, at least from interviews that I've read with him. And it's just like, holy shit, you know, like if anyone can say like, you know, I got it down, it's that dude, but he's still hungry to learn more. So anyway, I just think that that's so cool and inspiring. And sometimes like with metal, like, yeah, like because it's so brutal and like there's like a macho like element, and I think maybe it can come off as like, yeah, you know, I got this or whatever. But like in the jazz realm, it's like dudes are always, not that they haven't been like, you know, egotistical, you know, personalities in jazz over the years, but I guess it's like they kind of maybe earn it like a little bit more because they're just they know so much. But yeah, any like really great musician that I've interacted with is like always sort of hungry to learn more. Like they still have that like that spark and that excitement about music. I hope I never lose that because it's like just super inspiring to me.
I always really liked that like I said, the influence was always like pretty obvious to me in Revocation, or like there was, how do I put it? I always loved that you were able to use very jazz influenced type of harmony without ever making it sound jazzy, or like, I mean, maybe here and there, but using that mindset to create more interesting metal songs. And it was always fucking metal, and nobody listening to Revocation, I think, would ever be at almost any moment would never be like, oh man, this isn't that fucking metal. Like, this sounds like fucking nerd music. Like, it's always metal as fuck and evil as shit in ways that I think that the average metal band just hasn't been able to achieve. And I think for example, you mentioned like a minor major 7 and minor 7 flat 5 chords and stuff. I always felt like black metal bands should have been farming this shit fucking years ago. Like, where are the black metal bands using these minor major 7? Like, they always just use these fucking minor triads. I'm like, if you put a major 7 on that, it would be 10 times as evil. Why don't you look? Right. Come on.
Right.
So I always thought that was really cool.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, I know it's funny with black metal. But I don't know, minor triads have a vibe too. Like, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, if you just throw like a flatted 5th on there, or a major 7, it creates a different, a totally different sound. It's like, yeah, even more gnarly. I mean, there's probably some weird black metal band in France right now, like that have some crazy like jazz voicing. It's like out of like a Mel Bay book or something like that.
Yeah, I'm very interested. Yeah, I'm very interested to think hear what you're gonna think about my video that goes up tomorrow, because it's basically a jazz joke. Like, the whole thing is like one big, really stupid jazz joke, and you're either gonna laugh really hard or hate it. But it's basically a Giant Steps joke.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not tomorrow. That's not tomorrow's video. In a few weeks. I'm working on it right now. I'll send it to you when it's done.
Sure.
But the exploration of new and exciting sounds, to me, is like harmonically and melodically seems to be what jazz is more about than anything else, and like the sort of freedom to, like a little bit of a playground, and like I was saying earlier, it feels like that's sort of at odds with metal in a lot of ways. But you found a way to fuse it pretty well. Do you find that you talk to other metal musicians about this kind of stuff often, or I don't know? Do you ever feel weird about like having so much music knowledge around like fucking Neanderthal metal dudes who are bashing out cool shit that I love? All right, like no fucking hate. Like
right.
I'm a metalhead for life, but like you know what I mean. You know what the fuck I'm.
It's fun. Like sometimes I think maybe I like catch myself like nerding out. Like, oh, I just took it to Nerd Town right there, and like maybe I need to like dial it back. Like you can kind of see someone like, yeah, like sort of checking out a little bit. But other times, like I've had like really great conversations, and like I think it just all depends on the person. Like if me and like my buddy Luke LeMay from Gorguts, if we get together and we start talking about like fucking Penderecki or Stravinsky or whatever, like we'll nerd out. He'll be like, oh, have you heard this composer? And like I'm like, oh no, have you heard this guy? And we'll kind of go back and but he's classically trained and is very much in that realm. Like I don't know if I like but it really depends. I think it depends on the environment. It depends on how much alcohol has been consumed, right, or other mind-altering substances. Like, yeah, it just, I guess it just sort of depends. But like I think a lot of people are more open-minded, and for some people, it's like you just kind of need to like hold their hand a little bit, because like whether it's jazz or classical, it's not like the shallow end of the pool. Like the reason I got into it wasn't like I discovered it like on my own. I mean, certainly it's not like radio stations are like bumping this shit, or like it's like this like status symbol genre or whatever. I mean, you kind of have to like seek it out and be like exposed to it and like have someone like explain to you like why it's cool, why it's important. But that's like a lot of more like heady art. It's not like as simple as like 2 + 2 = 4 kind of thing. It's like it's much more like, all right, there's some underlying shit, and it's important for a variety of reasons. There's historical context, right? I mean, this shit doesn't just existing in a vacuum. I mean, there was political context. There's all of these things that were kind of coming to the forefront that led to for jazz, for example, being the genre that it is. I mean, the dudes that were pushing the envelope were like, I mean, really going for it. But I think that was for like a variety of reasons. I mean, one, they loved the music, but there was also like, it was essentially just sort of like, popular, dance music at the time. And these guys were like, no, like we want to push it into like, I mean, it's getting faster and I mean, bebop, it's like, you can't like dance to like bebop, It's like, I think it was sort of like kind of like the grindcore of jazz at the time. It's like just getting more and more extreme. It's like, okay, like, let's see you dance to this kind of thing, right? It's like we're gonna play like 300 BPM. And I think that's just kind of like in a way I see some overlap with metal, right? Like the extremity, going against the status quo, going against the grain, it being a form of protest music, it being like a fucking fuck you to people that like, it's supposed to be easy listening. It's supposed to be this or that. It's like, no, this is my music. I call the shots. I mean, think about John Coltrane, right? Totally misunderstood for a good portion of his career when he was exploring different avenues of free jazz. I mean, he was at the bleeding edge of that shit. And like critics, like fucking, some critics hated it. Like did not have nice things to say about Coltrane and Eric Dolphy and like all that shit. Like people just like didn't even get it. So like we have the luxury of like time where we can kind of look back, and I think we look at people that were just sort of that are like revered now, but maybe at the time like they were like completely misunderstood. And that's like a lot of great artists that are like that have a vision that really push it. Like people sometimes like aren't ready for that shit at that moment, like I remember touring with Atheists. Like that was like one of my first like tours that I did, and like I thought Atheists was so cool because they really leaned into the jazz metal thing. And like, I mean, I remember listening to them and like seeing the album covers and shit and getting to tour with them. And, they were like, yeah, people fucking hated us back in the day. Like people like didn't get it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they had their fans, but like, it was definitely like, if they're on tour with like, I mean, I don't know if they were tour with Death or any of those bands, but I'm sure there must have been a bunch of cross pollination of like other sort of Floridian death metal bands that they've joined up with. But like, yeah, I remember hearing stories where it's like, it's just, some people loved it, and then some people just like didn't get it at all. I was like, this isn't brutal, right? But it's like, but they're doing a different thing. So I do see overlap in terms of the, pushing the envelope, the creativity, the just the sheer endurance and speed and inhuman kind of quality of some of that shit. Like, when I watch like, I don't know, like, I mean, there's just so many like ridiculous blazing metal drummers out there. You're like, how is that possible? And then you like Tony Williams, and it's like, how is that possible? You know what I mean? Like playing blazingly fast, and these kids were like 19 sometimes, like in like, Miles Davis's band, just like cooking as fast as possible, and like it was probably like fucking melting people's brains back in the day. Like, how the fuck is this? Is like how are these dudes doing that? So I think there's an overlap there. But yes, in terms of the execution, it's very different because jazz is about, sort of the improvisational element of it is obviously the hallmark of jazz. And I think for metal, it's much more like classical, where it's about the execution. And it's like you go to see, you listen to the record, you hear it over and over and over again, and you go to see it live, and you want to see as close to that representation of it as possible. I always thought it would be cool to like just do like a 2-man band with like a drummer and just do like an fully improvised like grind band with someone that's like, just has real good kind of eye communication and like a good ear that you really vibe with, and like literally like, whatever recordings get made are just like only live, and if you don't come out to see it that night, like you're never gonna see the same thing again. So.
I pay to see that shit.
Right? So.
And hey, you don't have to rehearse.
Right.
You could do it tonight.
You just gotta practice your ass off to like, make sure that, when you go in, you got your chops right. But yeah, so.
But you're right. I think that to me, I think is part of why the songwriting portion in metal is so important, and still I think kind of underrated, or undervalued. In jazz, the composition is like, it's important that everybody knows it because you got to be on the same page. You got to play the head and then know the changes so that you can rip over them. And sometimes in some styles, it's much more important, like vocal jazz or whatever. But it's like you were saying, Keith Jarrett can rip on Autumn Leaves, the fucking absolute baseline first jazz song that everybody learns, and make it sound like something completely fucking different. In metal, because you're playing the song the way that it was written, and if you do it wrong, people are gonna fucking tear you apart. Like, you go up there and alternate pick, master, or puppets or whatever, like, right. You got to do it the way that it was written. So hence the fucking songwriting is so super duper important, right?
A riff is a beautiful thing,
Yeah. And
that's your tagline. That's the click of the YouTube video.
A riff is a beautiful thing. I'm gonna make a little
coffee mug.
A little look for collab Trey, Xavier, Dave Davidson merch. A riff is a beautiful thing. It's funny because my actual tagline is a riff is not a song.
We're just fucking that up. We're just flipping that around.
But it's but the actual point of that statement that of course was that like the full version is riffs are fucking great and super important,
right? But
you have to make a whole song out of it,
right?
Right. But that's a riff is a beautiful thing, and like you're saying, like it's more like classical music. It's composed a certain way. You have to do it right. There's a right and a wrong way. There's not a lot of wiggle room.
Right. Well, a riff, when you think about it, I mean, what is a riff in its most simplest terms? I mean, it's just sort of like a repeated, generally, anywhere between a bar to 4 bars to maybe 8 bars, right? Like repeated musical idea, but the whole point of it being repeatable, it needs to be worth repeating.
Yeah.
Right. So like so you need to really like put everything that you can into your riffs, because like, otherwise you could just have like, riff salad of one thing after the next. And it's, almost like, if nothing ever repeats, there's nothing ever to kind of like latch onto, which, might be an aesthetic for like, again, for some bands where, you could have like a song that just like is one long, I don't know if anyone really ever does this, but I guess it could
through
be
composed.
Kind of cool. Yeah. Like just one long thing, and it's just 3 minutes long, and it just is this musical kind of, it'd have to be incredibly orchestrated out, but like,
well, that's like Early Job for a Cowboy was like that, like nothing ever repeated. Like just,
but there was still riffs that like had a cycle that would come back, like, even if it was only once. Like I'm talking about,
okay,
just literally 3 minutes of like, there's no cycle back to, like, Job for a Cowboy had riffs because I could hear some of the riffs in my head, like they did repeat. Like, I mean, I'm talking like nothing repeats.
Right. It doesn't
ever.
Like it doesn't even repeat when it happens the one time.
Right, exactly. It's just this evolving thing, which could be its own thing, but it certainly wouldn't be like a traditional. I mean, that could be something fascinating to explore, actually, but
like one continuous.
First of all, it would require like just a ton of rehearsal, because there's nothing to, so everyone in the band would need to be like so fucking locked into it. And I guess, because the musical ideas would be would be just constantly evolving, there might need to be some type of thread that would carry it through in some way, maybe a motif or whatever. But yeah, that's not like, that wouldn't feel like traditional song, right? There wouldn't be any like riffs that you could point to in that song. So that just kind of goes to show the importance of a riff. It gives your ear something to latch onto. It gives something structure, and that's why make sure your riffs are sick, kids, because that's the most important thing about metal is a riff, I think.
Don't say that, Dave. No. I do think that that's a great way to look at it, though, because like I'm over here like trying to get people to figure out what to do with their riffs.
Right.
But the point that you've made about it being worth repeating is something that I think I've sort of glossed over, because I guess people like maybe inherently, like the average metal guitar player, maybe they know that inherently, or they because that's most of what they do is sit there and write riff after riff, that they realize that. But it's I didn't really look at it from that angle. Maybe just because I was sick of people sending me songs that were just fucking riffs and nothing on top.
Right.
But I'm going to have to think on that. This is the moment. I always have at least one revelatory moment in every podcast where I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta like rethink some shit. Because
next week it'll be like how riffs are made.
How riffs are made. I've abandoned the songwriting format entirely. Songs are out.
Songs.
Riffs are all that matters.
Yeah, you just need riffs, dude.
Oh shit. I was gonna ask. Okay. I'm gonna put a pin in that idea because I'm gonna have to think about that some more.
You need therapy after that one.
I need some therapy. I have to rethink all my shit. I guess I'd be curious about maybe some stuff that you would recommend to metal musicians who want to dip their toes in some jazz and learn a little bit. Like what's a good starting point?
So sure. I mean, I think there's just no substitute for like listening to it, so people like have come to me like, oh, I want to learn jazz, and I'm like, cool, like what are some of your favorite like jazz artists or whatever, and they have like zero, right? So like, it's not for everybody, right? Like, so you have to like of course like explore new genres, explore shit, but like if it's not for you, it's not for you. And like, but it is one of those, it's one of those genres where like, yeah, you can't kind of like half-ass it, right? Like it really needs to be like, you can appreciate it and not have to play it too. Like that's the other thing. Like not everyone's going to be good at jazz. I mean, it requires like a ton of dedication, and there isn't like, you can't be like you could start like you could be playing guitar for like a year and start like, kind of like a sludgy death metal band, and it could blow up and you could be the most popular band in like 2 years, and you get like some sick merch and you write some just like heavy sounding riffs, and it could be the best thing since sliced bread. Like that's like just how things work in different genres. It's the same thing with like punk, you know what I mean? Like it could be like people, you don't need to know music theory to be able to like play like punk rock. Like you gotta have like a good drummer that can play like D beats and shit, and like you gotta have like an ear for it, but like you don't need to know like the circle of fifths or like tensions or harmony or any shit like that. With jazz, in order to like get good at playing it, like they're like you have to like really learn like a whole like language, right? You can't fake it. You just like wouldn't even be able to like sit in on a gig. It's just you'd get like mowed down. And now like people are nicer. I mean, like back in the day, like I mean, in like Miles Davis's like autobiography, like he talks about like there was one scene, I think it was like called like Minton's or Milton's. It was some like jazz club in Harlem, and some like dude came to a jazz session like and like played saxophone, and he sucked, and like the patrons like beat the shit out of him. And they were like do not come back here. and unless you can play. Like that's how seriously they took it. I don't even think it was the musicians that did it. It was like the patrons. They were like, this is like this is sacred ground, and you just like defiled that, and like now you must pay. So like that to me is kind of sick.
God damn.
Because you just can't be a poser at all. So I don't know. I appreciate that. But if you're gonna like check out record, do your homework, learn about the history of it, like go back in time a little bit. You don't necessarily need to start with like the earliest like big band shit, but like look at the music of like a timeless jazz guitar player like Wes Montgomery, for example. Check out his record "Smoking at the Half Note." That's like one of the best jazz guitar records of all time. It's just an incredible record. His phrasing's beautiful. Like I'll sit down and like learn a little bit of that. That was one of the first solos I ever learned was 4 and 6, and it's just his phrasing is just so timeless and just so excellent. And then listen to other guys that influenced all of the greats and are obviously like greats themselves. Like listen to Charlie Parker. I mean, he like fucking wrote the book on bebop essentially, right? Like his tunes are still in the jazz Bible, right? Like it's like Anthropology, Confirmation. He wrote all these like great Ornithology, like all these like killer tunes that like are still played today, like on any given gig. Dexterity, another rhythm changes tune. So like explore that, and then maybe kind of keep going down the timeline, and obviously like check out Miles Davis, who is so revolutionary, and obviously John Coltrane, who arguably is the most important musician who's ever lived. And then see where your tastes fall. Like explore different instruments, right? I mean, I just brought up 3 horn players, right? I only named 1 guitar player so far. That's the beauty of jazz, is it's not guitar driven. Right. So like, yes, there's incredible jazz guitar players, both old and new, that are mind blowing. But, you talk to all those cats and they're like, they listen to piano players and listen to horn players. Like, it's not like with metal or with rock. I mean, you have drums, guitar / bass, and vocals, and maybe a keyboard once in a while, but, more often than not, right? So like, we're so used to hearing those instruments. Listen to jazz, not for guitar, but like for piano. Listen to Keith Jarrett. Listen to, Bill Evans. Listen to Herbie Hancock. Listen to Gonzalo Rubalcaba. Like all these, like those 4 guys I just named are completely different styles. Chick Corea, obviously, right? The dudes that were doing really revolutionary shit. And then horn players, Wayne Shorter, like I mentioned earlier, Eric Dolphy, who's like, the Demolich of jazz. Like he just was like writing just crazy, off the wall, like weird heads, like super bizarre, like just avant-garde shit that like was like blowing people's minds back then, and is still mind blowing. And find out your taste from there. So you can't like get good at it unless you start to like listen to it and do your homework a little bit. So I would say sort of listen to a whole bunch of stuff first, and then if you have interest in studying it, pick up a real book, pick up some type of chord, something with so you can learn your chords or whatever and your arpeggios, so you can just get some of these basic chord shapes down. And then like you really can't innovate until you can imitate. So like you can't just go in and start like playing over like Autumn Leaves and expect to sound good. Like learn someone else's solo over it. Learn 10 other people's solos over this tune. The nice thing about these jazz tunes is like once you know the form, like so many people have played these tunes. So you could listen to Chick Corea play Autumn Leaves, and you could listen to Keith Jarrett play Autumn Leaves, and they're both going to deliver like 2 monstrous solos. If you're a beginner, there's no way you're going to be able to play either of them. But like like something that's maybe more like approachable, like maybe you find, I mean, Wes Montgomery was a total technician, was amazing, but there's if you're a metal player, there's certain Wes shit that's definitely like attainable, that's going to blow your mind in terms of someone like the phrasing, like D Natural Blues, like he's playing the blues, but he's doing all this crazy shit on there. and it's not like blazing fast. It's like 16th notes, but at like a slower tempo. So like learn something like that and absorb that, and then try to put that into your own playing. Because if you don't have the vocabulary down, it's not going to come out sounding right. You can't just kind of like wing it. Like you not kind of need to like develop like a repertoire, and you need to like learn the vocabulary before you can start to like really make music on your own.
I always found that in my studying jazz, they didn't emphasize doing transcriptions like you're talking about nearly enough, and that I think that's because I think if everybody knew that you can't necessarily learn everything from doing transcriptions, but you might not have to go to music school if you do tons and tons and tons of very detailed transcriptions of stuff and really get inside of it. Like, you can't learn the names for shit, but like if I'd have done that instead of learning all the theory shit, I think I'd be a lot better of a musician. I mean, right. It's important to learn both if you want to actually do it.
That's the thing, because if you do the transcriptions and you don't have a frame of reference to put it into, like, and you're just looking at it like tab, you're not going to be able to see through like the noise. Let's say, like, you kind of need to know, like, oh, he's okay. This is the tab, but like these are the actual notes on this chord, and these are the intervals of those notes, and that's how it connects to that. Okay, someone's playing a C minor 7. He's playing E flat major 7, right? So it's like a tertiary harmony, like substitution. It basically gives you every chord tone except for the root and plus the 9, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, if he's playing, major 7, sharp 5, right, over C minor 7. Well, that's sort of the same thing, but now instead of like a C minor 7, it's more of like a C minor major 7. So it's coming from like maybe like a modal interchange of a melodic minor. So all that shit that I just said, like, if you don't know that, it's like not gonna, like, you're not gonna be able to see that from looking at it. But if you know that, you can kind of like see this cluster of notes and all of a sudden like hone it in to this one specific thing and say, okay, that's what that is. And then you see it time and time again. And you go, oh, okay, now I see what this person's doing. I look for overlap. Like if I see like the classic like major pentatonic line, if you take like a root major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 5th, Coltrane used that phrase. Wayne Shorter used that. It's just basically a major triad plus the 2nd degree of the scale, and it just sounds super melodic. But then you see other guys using it, like modern guys like Jonathan Kreisberg will do it, but he'll do it with like a tritone substitution, so you get like 2 different sounds, which I'm used to doing tritone subs of just the tri, but he'll throw that extra note in there to add a little bit something to it. And then like, you see it 3, 4, 10 times and it finally clicks and you say, oh, this is like an important piece of like the jazz, vocabulary. You can almost look at it like any kind of language, like with like slang, you know what I mean? Like you pick up like a new word or like a new like phrase or a piece of slang, and all of a sudden it becomes like part of like the natural, like everybody's like lexicon. And in jazz, it's obviously a much smaller portion of people that can like speak that, but like there's certain lines that I hear, I'm like, oh, that's a callback to like a Charlie Parker lick or something like that. It might be like in a modern context, and someone might like kind of fuck with the rhythm of it a little bit, but like it's like little pieces of language that you like interface with and see constantly, and then you can do your own thing from there.
Great. Hot damn, dude. Well, I could talk to you about this shit. I could listen to you talk about this shit for fucking days. Days of Daves. Dave days.
Yep.
But I don't want to take your life. So I think this is a pretty good spot for us to call it for the day. Nether Heaven is out September 9th.
Yes.
Sorry to take as I was saying, it feels like a very abrupt turn, but
yeah, just right into satanic death metal. It's going to be the best jazz album of 2022. I really feel that.
There's no question. And there's one single out already. One music video. Fucking great music video, by the way.
Thank you.
so much about it tickles me. You guys playing in an what was a church, been turned into a skate park, says so much to me. So everybody check that out. There is a link in the description where you can pre-order the album, and of course listen to the single. Plans for touring that you can reveal at this time? I feel like you mentioned it briefly earlier.
Yeah, so right when the record comes out, September 9th, we embark on a full U.S. and Canadian tour. I think we get back, like, it runs from basically like mid-September to like mid-October. So we're hitting a lot of cities. We're going out with Christian, with Alluvial, with Inoculation. Going to be a killer lineup. I think there really is something for everybody. Christian's got a new record coming out, so that's really, good timing there as well. Yeah, it's just going to be a fucking killer tour. So definitely come out to that. We will be announcing a European tour Wednesday. That's all I can say about that. But it's going to be another headliner, and we're really looking forward to that. So I don't know if I could. I probably shouldn't have even said that. I think even.
Nobody's watching this, anyways. We're broadcasting to an empty to nobody.
YouTubing into the void right now.
Into the void. Fuck. That's yep. That's my life. So thanks for staring into the void with me for a little while.
My pleasure, dude.
That's the only reason I invite people on here. They think there's an audience. It's all bots. It's just you and me and the bots.
Right.
But I learned something. And if we're lucky, the bots learned something, so that when the world ends and all the people are dead, they'll still be able to make great music.
That's right. Yeah, we're doing this for the AI, for our future robot overlords. May we be spared in the upcoming robot uprising. We're gonna just teach music to like the weird, hatchlings of the robot.
Little tiny robo children of the future.
Right.
Will come out of the womb.
You're not working on your 251s, Zeltoid. You gotta really.
Shit. Well, with that, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. I hope everyone watching learned a lot, and if you didn't, I don't give a shit because I did. I've already heard the album, but I'm going to continue to rock it. Is there
songs don't
else?
matter? It's only riffs.
Only riffs. That's the takeaway. Fuck yeah. Get it tattooed on your face or you're a fucking poser. Riffs are all that matter. No bozos allowed. All right, dude. Thank you so much. I will catch you on the Flippy Floppy.
Take care, man. Peace.
Bye. All right. That was fucking great. I had such a good time. Huge thanks to Dave. Revocation is one of the sickest bands on the planet. If I can tell you that the album is so sick, and definitely one of their best ones. I'm gonna have to spend a little bit more time with it for sure. Thank you all for listening. Big thanks to DistroKid for sponsoring the podcast. Like I said, I literally am distributing music through them for tomorrow's video. Don't miss tomorrow's video. Barring any unforeseen complications, 11 a.m. PST right here on the Gear Gods YouTube channel. If you're watching on Twitch, then it won't be right here. You'll have to go all the way to my YouTube channel. And be sure to check out the link in the description to both get the Nether Heaven pre-order situation and to get 7% off your first year of DistroKid if you're putting out music. DistroKid is the easiest and best way to get your music onto the internet. So be sure to sign up for that with my special link and you'll get a discount. I do these every week. Monday, 11 a.m. PST. Friday, I do song critiques all day starting at 1 p.m. PST live here on the channel. I go forever and ever. If you want to come hang out and get your songs roasted I call it roasting. It's not really roasted. It's thoughtful critique with occasional roasting and funny hats. But that's too long to put in the title. So come hang out here. Both the live streams are always both on Twitch and on YouTube. And I love doing this. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Don't you miss it. I'll see you real soon. Bye, guys.